my name's James Cockrell. I'm one of the Associate Directors here at Taylor Root London. I cover the US, Magic Circle, Silver Circle and top international law firms, ranging from associate all the way up to special counsel roles.
And I'm Tilly Herbert-Smith. I'm also in the private practice team here in London, and I manage the offshore desk, as well as focusing on international relocators into and out of Australia and New Zealand.
Hi. So Australian and New Zealand lawyers can underestimate how long it can ultimately take to land a role here in the UK market. What is different about the process here is that it can actually take quite a long time, maybe sometimes up to 6 months from when you first speak to a recruiter to ultimately landing a role, whereas back in Australia, it can take up to maybe a month or two.
I think a lot of people have had friends, family members, colleagues who maybe moved over when there was a really big hiring boom at the back end of COVID. Whereas now I would say it can take a lot longer than it might have taken back then to secure a role. And perhaps people also underestimate the amount of upskilling that they might have to do coming across. It will of course be really practice area dependent. Some firms might even require that you sit the SQE and cross-qualify here. But I do think that that is a really common factor that people maybe don't take fully into account when they start to think about making a move.
So recently we've seen the best practice areas for Aussie and Kiwi lawyers who are having the most success here in London would be anyone that falls under finance or corporate, whereas historically other areas like litigation and projects and construction have also been good, but that ultimately has come down to the market and the conditions not being favourable for those in recent times.
The most success that candidates will have are those coming out of transactional practice areas. So that's banking and finance, corporate, and competition is also a really popular one. We see a lot of candidates moving across all the time in those three practice areas. And then other practice areas will be really market dependent, disputes, arbitration, those sorts of things. They tend to be when the market's a lot busier that we see more candidates coming across. The interview structure over here in London is going to be relatively similar to how it's structured back home in Australia or in New Zealand. Generally speaking, you can probably expect around 3 interview stages. The main difference, I would say, is going to be the length of time over which you might undertake that process and then secure a role. Back home, it might be 1 to 2 weeks and then you've got the offer, whereas here it's often drawn out over several weeks, sometimes even longer. Whether or not that's because they've got more candidates in play or it's just the availability of partners to do these interviews, it really will depend, but that is probably a really common difference that people don't expect.
Generally, it's finding out personality, what your skill set is, any sort of competency-based questions as well associated with that, and I guess really just more about aptitude and I guess your ability overall in that practice area. So for you, and I guess when you're interviewing, it's not too different to what you're going to experience in Australia, and I think you just need to be very clear with what your day-to-day role is, explaining matters that you've been involved with, and giving them a good sense that you know what you're doing and you can add value to the team.
There are a couple of things that candidates coming across can do to prepare to really stand out from other people in their cohort. Those things I would say are starting to research the differences in law for their practice area before they even start to prepare their CV, so that they're prepared as far as, what is it that I'm addressing in my CV, because what you might discuss in an Australian or Kiwi market might be quite different than what you would want to highlight for the market over here. It will also help when you actually do reach that interview stage to be able to talk to, well, I'm going to need to upskill in X, Y, and Z areas, or I can speak really confidently to how the competition regime in Australia, for example, differs to the competition regime here, and that will make you really stand out as a candidate. As far as preparing your CV goes, it should be as detailed as possible. We often see candidates talking about a 1 to 2 page CV back home. It's not the case over here. Your CV should really detail the matters that you've worked on in as much detail as possible, whether or not that's the deal size, who you were acting for, documents you were drafting, and the responsibility that you took. It's important to research before you come over what your options might be. We most commonly see candidates coming over on the Youth Mobility Scheme. That's for candidates between the ages of 18 and 35 out of Australia and New Zealand. And other options can be things like the Ancestry Visa, and sponsorship, of course, can be available where firms offer it. However, we do tend to see more of a reticence to sponsor more junior candidates, and that's more likely to be an option at the more senior level. Australian and Kiwi lawyers, when they move to the UK, can expect to have a lot of different opportunities at different ranges as far as salary is concerned. Obviously, you have elite US firms which pay Cravath rates. They generally get published each year in about January, and you can easily look that up online. And then you have the Magic Circle. Again, you can generally look up online what the NQ rate is, and of course we can give you some advice as to ranges depending on your level of PQE. Silver Circle as well, relatively transparent. And then you have city firms which tend to pay less than Silver Circle, but again, we can discuss with you what those ranges will be. Generally speaking, people can expect to earn at least a fair bit more than what they're currently earning, but it will of course depend on things like practice area and the firm that they end up at.
When moving to the UK, obviously salary is going to be fairly different. The US firms tend to pay the most, with Magic Circles following after that. Then it makes its way down to the Silver Circle firms, and then your sort of other international firms and other national law firms. I guess with the higher salary comes longer hours generally, but I guess you sort of know what you're going to get yourself in for. When you sort of target those types of firms, generally we see candidates coming out of the top tier firms in Australia and New Zealand having the best luck at the US and Magic Circle firms. And another thing to note is that they do discount you 2 years. So I guess when you're looking at pay scales, generally discount your PAE or PQE by 2 years, and that's sort of where you'll find yourself on any relevant salary guide. My favourite parts about living in London is that no day is generally the same. There's amazing places to eat, amazing places to go out, and most of all, you meet some amazing new people and make some great friendships. On top of that, I've found the ability to travel has been amazing. You can go anywhere in Europe, pretty much anywhere in the world, and that's probably something you don't really get the access to back home at sort of the rate that you do here, and you can just skip away for the weekend. It's pretty amazing.
My favourite part of living in London, I would say, is the ability to go out and do so many different things any night of the week. It's such a vibrant city. There's so many opportunities to meet people and make new friends. There's a wonderful expat community, and I also really enjoy taking every single opportunity available to me to travel.
If you're preparing to move over to the UK, piece of advice I would give would be to partner with a recruiter, a good recruiter. They'll be able to not only help you with your CV and give you a great overview about the market and what's going on, but also hopefully give you some really strong advice, anything to do with where to live, setting up a bank account, getting a phone number, just all the basic stuff that you can't forget about when you're focusing really on just looking for a job.
My best advice to someone who's just moved over and it's, say, their first week here is don't panic. Everything will work out. I think the first 3 months are always the hardest, but you will find somewhere to live. You'll create your friendship group. You'll regrow those support networks that you had back home, and things at work will start to click as you fit into the team.